When a map that should not have existed appeared on the screen, David realized that his life had just split into before and after. Behind the icy wall of Antarctica stretched continents, 178 landmasses, each with its own oceans, mountain systems, and green zones. He couldn't believe his own eyes. A territory 40 times larger than all known Earth, and all of it hidden behind a barrier whose existence humanity had never suspected. David had worked as a cartographer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory for 11 years. His specialization was polar regions, compiling topographic maps of Antarctica's ice cover for research stations and climate models. Routine work with LiDAR data, calibration of elevation profiles, processing satellite images. Over the years, he had studied every major glacier on the sixth continent. He knew the locations of all scientific bases, from the American McMurdo to the Russian Vostok. He could recite the routes of sled track expeditions from memory. To him, Antarctica was a familiar territory, harsh, dangerous due to its extreme climate, but absolutely predictable in terms of geography. On that day, in late March 2022, he was updating a map of Queen Maud Land for a Norwegian expedition. Standard procedure: download the latest images from Satellite 3 from the shared archive, run them through processing filters, overlay them on the existing elevation grid. He launched the download script, but the system returned an access error with a code he had never seen in all his years of work. Usually, such errors meant a temporary server failure or authentication issues. He tried to bypass the lock using backup access, leveraging his senior cartographer credentials. The system opened a directory, but not the one he had requested. Instead of the familiar folder with public data, a directory labeled Barrier Deep appeared on the screen. Inside were files with extensions not used in standard NASA protocols. David knew he should immediately log out and report the accidental access. Instead, he clicked on the first file. The download was slow. The data volume clearly exceeded ordinary satellite images. When the image finally loaded on the monitor, David thought there had been a rendering error or a color mapping glitch. Instead of the familiar white surface of the ice shield, he saw a detailed coastline complex, indented with bays and peninsulas, with clearly visible river deltas and mountain ridges. The color palette ranged from brown to dark green, as if someone had taken a map of a normal habitable continent and mistakenly overlaid it with Antarctic coordinates. He checked the data alignment. The coordinates were correct. The center of the image matched the Ross Ice Shelf, which David had mapped dozens of times. But instead of the ice barrier rising tens of meters high, the image showed a vertical structure of a completely different nature. David switched the visualization to elevation profile. A wall, there was no other word for it, rose 300–400 meters above sea level and stretched in an unbroken line along the entire coastline. He opened the second file, then the third. With each new image, the scale of the picture expanded. Beneath the ice cover of Antarctica, which, according to all scientific data, had an average thickness of about 2 kilometers and had covered the continent for millions of years, a detailed surface topography was visible. Not the subglacial terrain sometimes scanned by ground-penetrating radar, but an actual ice-free surface. Mountain systems with distinct peaks, river valleys with tributaries, plateaus with characteristic erosion. The structure was so detailed and complex that it could not be explained by measurement errors or processing artifacts. David zoomed in on a section of the coastal zone. The image resolution allowed objects just a few meters in size to be distinguished. The ice wall he had seen in the elevation profile, upon closer inspection, showed characteristics incompatible with natural ice. The surface was too smooth, almost polished, without the typical layering or cracks found in glaciers. The geometry was too perfect. The wall followed a strict latitude line, not deviating by even a degree over hundreds of kilometers. He switched to infrared. The temperature of the wall was 7 degrees C higher than the surrounding ice. This contradicted all laws of thermodynamics. Ice cannot be warmer than the air in Antarctica, where the average annual temperature is degrees C. David ran the section through spectral analysis. The chemical composition did not match water ice. The signature was closer to mineral compounds, but with an anomalous crystal structure not found in nature. Behind the wall began a territory that did not exist on any world map. David opened the overview file showing the entire southern hemisphere. The image that unfolded before him contradicted not just geography, it contradicted the very physics of the planet. Antarctica looked like a relatively small island in the center of a colossal landmass. Beyond the ice wall stretched continents, separated by oceans, with mountain ranges, plains, inland seas. He began counting the major landmasses, marking each one on a separate map layer. He counted 178, not including countless archipelagos and islands. David checked the scale bar. If the data were correct, the total area of the territory beyond the wall exceeded all known land on Earth by approximately 43 times. This was impossible within the framework of a planet with a known diameter of 6,371 km. Even if one assumed the existence of some hidden lands beneath polar ice, a territory of this scale simply could not fit on a sphere of that radius. Either the map was a complete fabrication, or something fundamentally wrong was present in humanity's basic understanding of the planet's shape and size. He opened the coordinate grid file, hoping to find an error in the data alignment that would explain the anomaly. The grid used the standard WGS-84 system, the same one used in all GPS navigators and satellite maps, but the latitude values beyond the ice wall continued to rise beyond 90 degrees. On one of the distant continents, David saw a coordinate marker at 123 degrees south latitude. From the standpoint of existing cartography, this was absurd. Latitude is measured from the equator to the pole. The maximum value is 90 degrees. There is nowhere further to go. This is the mathematical limit of a spherical coordinate system. David opened the climate data attached to the images. Temperatures beyond the wall varied across a huge range, from -50 degrees C in the polar regions to +23 degrees C in the equatorial zones of some distant continents. Spectral analysis of the atmosphere showed oxygen concentrations typical of Earth, and what was completely baffling, clear markers of chlorophyll. Vegetation. Extensive vegetation in a territory that theoretically lies in the zone of eternal ice. He switched to high-resolution visible range images. On one of the medium-sized continents located about 3,000 km beyond the ice wall, he could make out masses that could only be described as forests. Green areas comparable in size to the Amazon, with the characteristic texture of vegetation cover, and a river network feeding the ecosystem. On another image, a mountain range whose peaks exceeded 9,000 meters according to LiDAR scans, taller than Everest. David looked at the file timestamps. All the data had been collected in a short period from January 15 to 22 of the current year. These were the same dates that, in NASA's public reports, were marked as a technical maintenance period for Satellite 3, when data transmission was supposedly suspended. But the satellite hadn't just been offline. It had been operating under a special program, using scanning modes not employed in ordinary research. He tried to find technical documentation for this imaging. In the root folder of the directory, he found a text file marked Restricted Access and stamped Cosmic Top Secret, the highest level of secrecy in NATO classification, used only for information whose disclosure could cause exceptionally grave damage to national security. David opened the document, expecting to see technical imaging parameters. The first paragraph described a special satellite operating mode, using quantum radar with synthetic aperture, a system capable of penetrating any opaque material, including multi-kilometer thick ice, and building detailed maps of what lies beneath or beyond it. A technology David had only heard about in the context of theoretical military lab developments. But then came a paragraph that made him reread the text several times, checking if it was a hallucination. The imaging was conducted as part of data verification obtained during the Admiral Byrd II expedition in February 1947. Target zone coordinates match the flight route from Little America Base, with a deviation of no more than 3 km. Confirmed presence of geographical objects described in the original expedition reports, including zones of anomalous temperature, ice-free areas, and structures of unknown origin. David knew perfectly well about Admiral Byad's expedition. Operation Highjump, the largest Antarctic expedition in human history at the time. 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier, an icebreaker, and a submarine. 23 aircraft of various types. 4,700 personnel. Official goal: establishing American military presence in Antarctica, mapping the coastline, testing equipment and personnel in extreme cold. The expedition was planned for 8 months, from December 1946 to August 1947, but was abruptly terminated after just 2 months, in late February 1947. Official reasons for the early termination were never clearly explained. There was talk of bad weather, although Antarctic summer was the ideal time for exploration. There were mentions of resource shortages, which was strange for an expedition that had been planned for over a year and funded at the state level. Most of the expedition's materials remain classified to this day, despite more than 75 years having passed. Admiral Byad himself gave several contradictory interviews after returning, speaking in cryptic phrases about a territory the size of the United States discovered beyond the pole, then suddenly fell silent and never publicly spoke of Antarctica again. The document listed the exact coordinates of the expedition's base camp on the Ross Ice Shelf and the route of Byad's flight on February 20. David opened the map in a separate window and began plotting these points. The base was located in the Whale Bay area, from where the aircraft took off. The route went strictly south, crossing the ice shelf, then the ice plateau deep in the continent, and continued further. The straight-line distance was 2,700 km, one way too far for ordinary reconnaissance or mapping. Such a route required an aircraft with extended fuel capacity and special training. David found partially declassified diary entries of Byad in open archives. The first part described routine expedition operations, setting up camp, meteorological observations, training flights. Then came the records of the major reconnaissance flight on February 20. 10:02 local time, crossed the mountain range. Below us opened a valley, an impossible valley without snow. Outside air temperature plus 19 degrees F degrees C. At latitude 87 degrees south, even such a temperature is unthinkable. In February, I see vegetation. Something like moss or low shrubs. Color: green with brown. The radioman confirms thermometer readings. Instruments are functioning normally. Official explanations claim these entries were either misdated or mixed up with notes from another flight in milder latitudes that had accidentally ended up in the Antarctic expedition diary. But David was now looking at a map that confirmed every word. Beyond the ice wall, there really were zones with positive temperatures. There really was vegetation and valleys free of ice at latitudes where, according to all laws of climatology, there should be permafrost. He returned to the satellite images and began systematically studying the territory immediately beyond the wall in the area of the presumed flight route. The landscape there was relatively flat, an extensive plateau with small elevations. Climate data showed an average annual temperature of -23 degrees C, cold, but not extreme. The images showed a surface covered with something that gave a spectral signature of organic matter. Not dense forests, but something like tundra vegetation, mosses, lichens, possibly low shrubs. David moved the map further south, following the route. As the distance from known Antarctica increased, the climate became milder. 1,000 km beyond the wall, summer temperatures already reached 0 degrees C. 2,000 km further, the images began to show masses that could only be classified as forests, coniferous, judging by the texture, similar to boreal taiga. Further still, the climate continued to warm, vegetation became richer, and large rivers with wide floodplains appeared. The further he moved across the map, the more absurd the picture became. This was not just a hidden territory behind the Antarctic ice. This was an entire system of worlds, each with its own climate, geography, and ecosystem. Continents with tropical zones at the equators and temperate climates in mid-latitudes, oceans with currents, archipelagos, atolls. All of this existed somewhere beyond the barrier that humanity had accepted as the edge of the habitable world. David launched a pattern recognition program, a tool normally used to search for traces of ancient rivers beneath ice or analyze glacial structures. He set the parameters to search for geometrically regular shapes, repeating structures, straight lines longer than 1 kilometer. The algorithm began scanning the data array, flagging anomalies. After 20 minutes, the system returned the result: 4,287 objects classified as potentially artificial structures. David opened the list and began reviewing the findings. Most were located on the major continents in temperate climate zones. The sizes varied incredibly, from small objects a few tens of meters across to giant structures stretching for hundreds of kilometers. On one continent, approximately 4,000 km beyond the wall, the system highlighted an area 120 by 80 kilometers, covered in rectangular structures arranged in a perfect grid. David zoomed in to maximum resolution. The rectangles were each about 3 by 5 kilometers, separated by perfectly straight lines 200 meters wide. Inside each rectangle, a finer structure was visible, something like city blocks with regular planning. It looked like a giant city or complex of cities, but the scale was terrifying. If the entire built-up area was calculated, it came to nearly 10,000 square kilometers, larger than Los Angeles and its suburbs. On another continent, the system identified linear objects connecting various points. David traced one of the lines. It stretched 730 kilometers in a perfectly straight line, crossing rivers, elevations, and plains. The width was about 50 meters, the surface perfectly smooth. In some places, the line ran on elevated viaducts above valleys. In others, it passed through tunnels carved into mountains. It was a transport artery of a scale rarely seen even on Earth. The most mysterious find was a structure in the center of the largest continent, a perfectly circular formation, exactly 80 kilometers in diameter. Inside it, 7 concentric rings, nested with mathematical precision. Each ring was about 1 kilometer wide, separated by 3-kilometer gaps. At the very center, a circular platform 10 kilometers across. David switched to 3D elevation view. The rings rose 30-40 meters above the surrounding terrain. The structure looked ancient. On the slopes of the rings, erosion was visible. In some places, the structure was partially destroyed, but the overall geometry was preserved. He tried to find analogs in Earth's archaeology. Concentric rings appear in ancient fortifications, temple complexes, observatories, but not at this scale. 80 kilometers in diameter, that's greater than the distance from the center of Moscow to its outer suburbs. Building such a structure would require technology and resources comparable to modern megaprojects, like building a capital city from scratch. David leaned back in his chair, trying to make sense of what he had seen. Every detail alone could have a rational explanation. Anomalies in the data, processing artifacts, errors in automatic pattern recognition. But taken together, they formed a picture that did not fit into any framework, a territory that should not exist. A climate that cannot exist at these latitudes, structures indicating the presence of a civilization, one never once mentioned in human history. He looked at the clock in the corner of the screen. 12:30 a.m. More than 4 hours had passed since he opened the first file. The lab building was long empty. The day shift had left at 6:00 p.m. The night staff worked in other wings. The corridor outside his office window was dark and silent. Only the hum of ventilation and the soft buzz of servers in the next room broke the silence. David understood. He was in territory he was never meant to enter. Data of this level of secrecy does not appear in public directories by accident. Either there had been a serious security system failure, or someone had intentionally granted access, knowing that a curious employee wouldn't be able to resist. In any case, The correct action was to immediately close the files, log out, and report the accidental access to security in the morning. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a flash drive. A 64 GB stick he usually used to transfer work files between his home computer and the office. David inserted it into the port, created a new folder on the desktop, and began dragging files from the Barrier Deep directory. The overview map of the hemisphere detailed images of key zones climate data spectral analysis. Results the secret document stamped Cosmic Top Secret. The progress bar indicated the copying would take about 5 minutes. David watched the slowly moving bar, feeling his heart beat faster than usual. He was crossing a line, after which there would be no way back. Possessing classified materials was punishable not just by termination. It was a federal crime, carrying a prison sentence of up to 10 years. But he couldn't just walk away, not after what he had seen. Information of this scale could not remain hidden just because someone had decided to stamp it classified. Humanity had the right to know what existed beyond the known map of the world, that beneath the icy shell of Antarctica lay not just bedrock, but an entrance to territories dozens of times larger than all known land. The progress bar reached 90%. The indicator blinked, showing the final file. The overview map at maximum resolution was being copied. At that exact moment, the monitor went black. Not a gradual fade-out or sleep mode, an instant shutdown as if the power had been cut. The system unit under the desk stopped humming. Total silence. David froze, staring at the black screen. He reached for the power button, pressed it. Nothing. He tried again, holding it longer. The computer remained dead. He checked the power outlet. The indicator was on. The building hadn't lost electricity. They had remotely shut down his machine. He yanked the flash drive from the port. The LED on the drive was off, but that meant nothing. It only lit during data transfer. Maybe the files had been copied before the shutdown. He had to check, but not here. David slipped the flash drive into his pocket, closed his backpack, stood up and walked to a nearby workstation just 3 meters away. He pressed the power button. The computer booted normally, showed the login screen. He returned to his seat. His machine was still unresponsive. They had shut it down deliberately, knowing exactly which station was accessing forbidden data. The security system was working in real time, and it had logged every second of his activity. David sat back in his chair, trying to calm his breathing and assess the situation. Access to the files had been recorded. The attempt to copy them had been logged. Somewhere in the server logs, a complete record of his actions over the past 4 hours remained. Security already knew. The only question was, how fast would they react? He heard the elevator doors open at the end of the corridor, a soft chime, the clack of sliding doors. Then footsteps, several people, fast, precise, the kind of steps taken by people who know exactly where they're going and why. David pulled out his personal laptop from his backpack, opened it, inserted the flash drive. The machine booted agonizingly slowly. It felt like a full minute, though it was only 15 seconds. The footsteps were getting closer. He opened the drive's contents. Only one file, a screenshot of the overview map of the southern hemisphere in maximum resolution, 3.2 GB. The last file in the copying queue, somehow the only one that had made it. He opened the image. The entire picture was there. Antarctica in the center, a small island, the ice wall along its perimeter beyond it, continents stretching to the edge of the map, all 178 landmasses, with oceans between them, mountain systems, river networks. The footsteps stopped right outside his office door. David closed the laptop, slipped it into his backpack along with the flash drive. The door opened without a knock. 3 men entered. 2 in dark suits, 1 in NASA security uniform with shoulder patches. The older man in the suit, about 50, gray hair, a motionless face, walked up to David's desk and placed a leather badge wallet on the tabletop. "Agent Mills, National Security Agency. I need to ask you a few questions about your work tonight." David looked at the badge, saying nothing. The National Security Agency, not NASA security, not the FBI. A structure that deals with intelligence and counterintelligence at the highest level. The fact that they were here less than an hour after the copying attempt said everything. The data he had accessed was not just classified. It was under constant automated surveillance, and any interaction with it triggered an immediate alert. "I was working on the Queen Maud land map," David said, trying to keep his voice steady. "There was an access error to the archive. I tried to bypass it through the backup server and gained access to materials unrelated to my work." Mills walked around the table and looked at the dark, powered-off monitor. "You spent 3 hours and 47 minutes viewing files from a directory that requires TS/SCI clearance with additional restrictions. You don't have that clearance. You saw the classification stamps, read the documents, downloaded images. At 12:04 a.m. you initiated copying of materials to an external drive. This is no longer accidental access. This is willful theft of classified information." David said nothing. Denial was pointless. They knew every action to the second. "Where's the drive?" Mills asked. "The copying didn't complete. You shut down the computer." "Where's the drive?" he repeated, and steel crept into his voice. David reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the flash drive. He handed it to Mills. Mills took it, passed it to the security officer. "Check the contents, now." The officer nodded and left the office with the drive. The second agent, who had stood silently by the door, stepped forward. "Did you use personal devices to access the data?" "No," David said. "The backpack?" The agent nodded toward the bag by the table. David stood, handed it over. The agent unzipped it and began methodically removing items. Thermos with coffee, spare t-shirt, phone, charger, notebook with work notes, laptop. "This is a personal device, correct?" The agent opened the laptop, pressed the power button. The screen lit up, showing the login prompt. "Password," he said. David gave it. The system booted. Desktop. A few folders. Standard background. The agent opened the file manager, browsed the drive, stopped at recent files. There was one item. Barrier Deep Overview Hemisphere South. PNG opened 4 minutes ago. Mills stepped closer, looked at the screen, opened the file. The map filled the screen: Antarctica, the wall, the continents beyond, all the information that should never have left the secure network. "So the copying did complete after all," Mills said quietly. He closed the laptop, took it from the table, handed it to the second agent. "Full forensic analysis." Then he turned back to David. "You understand the seriousness of this situation. You gained unauthorized access to top-secret materials. You copied them to a personal device. This is a violation of the Espionage Act, Article 798. Penalties include up to 10 years in federal prison." David felt cold spread through his body. 10 years for a file he opened out of curiosity, for a map he saw by chance. "But there is another option," Mills continued. "You sign a non-disclosure agreement with expanded obligations. You admit access was accidental without malicious intent. You agree to never speak of what you saw to anyone ever. In exchange, no criminal charges. You keep your job, your freedom, your reputation." "And if I refuse?" David asked. Mills looked at him for a long moment. "Then tomorrow morning you'll be arrested, charged with attempted theft of state secrets. The materials will be sealed, the trial held in secret. You'll have no chance to speak of what you saw because mentioning it is itself a crime. You'll spend years in prison, and the information you tried to save will remain hidden, just as it has been for the last 75 years. David said nothing. It wasn't even an ultimatum. It was a statement of inevitability. The system didn't need scandals or public trials. It needed silence. "Where's the document?" David asked. Mills reached into his jacket and pulled out folded papers, spread them on the table. A standard non-disclosure agreement, but with clauses David had never seen. Ban on discussing Antarctica in any context beyond public information, consent to periodic security compliance, checks automatic lifetime extension of all obligations. Mills handed him a pen. David took it, looked at his hand hovering over the paper. One signature and he would become part of the silence, part of the mechanism that hides the truth of the world from humanity. He signed. Mills took the papers, folded them neatly, put them back in his pocket. "Good. Now go home. Tomorrow back to work as usual. No changes in routine, no unusual behavior." David nodded, took his backpack, now empty without the laptop or flash drive, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned. Is it real what I saw on the maps? The continents beyond the wall. Mills looked at him for a long moment, not answering. Go home, he repeated. David stepped into the corridor, walked to the elevator, pressed the call button. Stood there, staring at the closed doors, feeling like a man who had looked beyond the edge of the known world and was now obliged to pretend he saw nothing. That beyond the icy wall of Antarctica, there was only ice. That Earth was exactly as shown in textbooks and atlases. That 178 continents, oceans, ancient structures the size of countries were just a hallucination or a data error. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. David stepped inside, pressed the button for the first floor. The cabin began to descend, but he knew it was real. Every detail of that map was etched into his memory with photographic precision. The shape of the continents, the location of mountain systems, the coordinates of the strange structures. He had seen it with his own eyes, studied the data, checked the coordinate alignment. It was real, and someone had to know sooner or later. No matter how carefully the secret was guarded, information of this scale could not stay hidden forever. Someone else would gain access or make an independent discovery or find Bayard's old expedition logs, and the truth would out. David exited the building into the cool California night, walked to his car in the parking lot, got behind the wheel, but didn't start the engine. He just sat there, staring at the lights in the window. Somewhere thousands of kilometers away, across oceans and ice, there existed a territory about which humanity knew nothing. Lands dozens of times larger than all known continents. Civilizations that had left behind structures surpassing anything ever built on Earth. And he, a simple cartographer, was one of the few who had seen the map of that hidden world. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. The streets of Pasadena were nearly empty at this hour. Just the occasional car, traffic lights blinking yellow at intersections. He drove automatically, not thinking about the route, just following familiar turns toward home. But his thoughts kept returning to the map, to the continents stretching beyond the horizon, to the ice wall rising into the sky, to the ancient structures, eroded by time, but still preserving their perfect geometry, and to the feeling that someone was watching, countless invisible eyes, tracking every step. He parked in the driveway of his small house on a quiet residential street. Old trees lined the sidewalk, no night pedestrians. He got out, glanced around. The street looked absolutely ordinary, no suspicious cars, no figures in the shadows. But he knew it meant nothing. If they were watching, he wouldn't see them. Professionals from the National Security Agency don't make amateur mistakes. He went inside, turned on the hallway light. Everything was in its place, the usual bachelor apartment of a cartographer who spends most of his life at work. Kitchen with unwashed dishes, living room sofa, big monitor on the wall, bedroom lined with bookshelves. He filled a glass of water, drank it in one go. Hands still trembling slightly, adrenaline from the agent's visit hadn't worn off. He took out his phone, the same smartphone he always carried. Screen showed 2303. He unlocked it, opened the browser, typed Operation Highjump 1947. Dozens of articles, documentaries, conspiracy forums appeared instantly. He opened the Wikipedia page, a short description of the expedition, official goals, force composition, chronology. Scrolled to the section on early termination. The expedition was abruptly halted at the end of February 1947, 6 months ahead of schedule. Official sources cite adverse weather and the need to reallocate military resources. Full materials remain classified to this day. He switched to another tab, found scanned diary pages of Admiral Bayard, the same fragments officially dismissed as dating errors. Outside air temperature plus 19 degrees F. I see vegetation, something like moss or low shrubs. Valley free of snow at latitude 87 degrees S. He compared the notes with what he had seen on the satellite map. The match was perfect. Bayard had indeed flown over the territory beyond the ice wall, had seen zones with positive temperatures and vegetation, and had been forced to keep silent for the rest of his life. David closed the browser and thought. The existence of lands behind Antarctica was not a secret to everyone. The 1947 Bayard expedition had confirmed it. The January satellite shoot had provided a detailed map, which meant there was a group inside the government, military intelligence people who knew the truth, who had access to the full data, and who decided to keep it hidden. The simplest explanation: panic and destabilization. If humanity learned that known geography was only a tiny part of reality, that beyond the ice wall lay territories 40 times larger, it would shatter fundamental worldviews, religions, scientific theories, geopolitics based on dividing a limited world. But there was a second, darker explanation. The structures he had seen on the maps. Cities 1,000 kilometers across transport arteries crossing continents in straight lines, 80-kilometer concentric rings built with mathematical precision, all pointed to a civilization non-human. Otherwise, there would be historical records, contacts, traces of migration. A civilization that had existed parallel to ours, behind a barrier separating two worlds. He went into the bedroom, opened the wardrobe, took an old tablet from the top shelf, hadn't used it in over a year, powered it on, waited for the system to load. The tablet had never been online, never synced with cloud services, an autonomous device, perfect for storing information that must never reach the network. He opened a drawing app, took the stylus, and began reconstructing the map from memory. First the general outline, Antarctica in the center, the circular ice wall around it, then the largest continents beyond the wall, their relative positions, approximate sizes, coastline shapes, mountain systems, major rivers, vegetation zones highlighted on the spectral images. He worked slowly, adding detail. His professional memory operated flawlessly. Years of cartography had trained him to memorize spatial structures with high accuracy. He marked key coordinates, continental dimensions, distances between objects, everything he remembered from the satellite data. When the basic geography was done, he added the anomalous structures. The giant rectangular city size, coordinates, orientation to the cardinal directions, the circular formation of 7 rings, exact 80 km diameter. Located in the center of the largest continent, the straight transport arteries connecting different zones, length, width, elevation profiles. By the time first light of dawn began filtering through the curtains, the map was complete. Not as detailed as the original satellite images, but accurate enough to give any specialist a clear idea of the scale of the hidden territory. He saved the file under an innocuous name, Backyard Landscaping Draft, PNG, something that would attract no attention during a random device check. He turned off the tablet, hid it back in the wardrobe. Now the question: what to do with this information? The non-disclosure agreement he had signed made any attempt to publish the data a crime, but the agreement only bound him. If the information reached third parties who had no such obligations, they could act freely. He needed a mediator, an investigative journalist or independent researcher with reputation and audience, someone who could work with information of this magnitude. He found the name: Martha Keller, independent journalist who had published major leaks from government structures, sued the state and won source protection cases. If anyone could handle this, she could, but contact had to be untraceable. Any direct link, email, phone call, meeting, would be instantly detected. He needed a method that left no digital trail and required no personal contact. He devised a plan. Create an anonymous email via Tor network, upload the restored map and a detailed description of the satellite data to an encrypted cloud locker. Send Martha Keller the link with a minimal message. No personal data. No return address. Do it all from a public Wi-Fi spot never before used by him. Even this carried risks. Tor could be monitored. Public hotspots had cameras. One mistake and the link would be established, violating the agreement and landing him in federal prison. He weighed the risks for days. Was information about hidden continents worth losing his freedom? Maybe it was safer to stay quiet, keep the secret, hope someone else would uncover the truth. But every time he looked at the restored map, the answer was the same. Humanity has the right to know what lies beyond the ice wall. The real geography of the planet. ancient structures pointing to an unknown civilization. And if he didn't pass it on, who would? The mysterious text message, "You are not the only one who knows," had been more warning than promise of help. Others who knew were bound by the same agreements, the same threats. They feared to act or saw no need or accepted silence as inevitable. He made the decision. Saturday morning he left the house with the tablet in his backpack, drove to downtown Los Angeles, parked near a large shopping mall, went inside, located the food court public Wi-Fi. Sat at a corner table, ordered coffee, took out the tablet but did not switch it on yet. First he activated his phone for 30 seconds, checked messages, powered it off again. This created a digital breadcrumb. His phone logged at the mall. If anyone checked, they'd see David spent Saturday at a shopping center, normal weekend behavior. Only then did he power on the tablet, launch Tor browser, wait for the network connection, create a new anonymous email via Proton Mail, uploaded the map file and detailed description to an encrypted locker, copied the link. He found Martha Keller's contact on her independent news site, composed a short message. NASA satellite data shows territories beyond Antarctica exceeding known land by 40 times. 178 continents behind ice wall. Structures indicate unknown civilization. Classified since 1947. Files attached. Verify independently. Do not attempt contact. Attached the locker link and password, pressed send, closed all apps, cleared browser history, powered off the tablet. He sat for another 20 minutes, sipping cold coffee, glancing around ordinary Saturday mall. Families, couples, teenagers. No one paid him any attention. He left the cafe, walked through the mall, exited to the parking lot, drove away. On the way home he stopped at a small lake in a park, got out, strolled along the shore, opened the backpack, removed the tablet's memory card, flicked it into the water far from shore. The tablet itself followed. He smashed the screen on a rock, threw the pieces into the lake in different spots. The device that had held the restored map no longer existed. The only copy now lay in the encrypted locker, accessible only to Martha Keller. The rest of the day was ordinary. Cleaned the apartment, watched a movie, cooked dinner, went to bed. No feeling of triumph, just quiet certainty he had done what he had to do. A week passed. David continued working at the lab, scanning news sites, expecting Martha Keller's article. Nothing appeared. Second week, still nothing. Maybe she was verifying the data, seeking additional sources, or had dismissed the email as conspiracy spam. Then Monday evening, he returned home, switched on his computer, and the headline blazed from the front page of a major news site. Exclusive. NASA satellite data indicates hidden territories beyond Antarctica. What is the government hiding from humanity? He clicked. The article was long, meticulous, packed with maps, infographics, quotes from declassified BIA diaries, comments from independent remote sensing experts confirming the technical feasibility of such data. It included the restored map he had sent, showing location of continents beyond the ice, wall, their dimensions, coordinates of anomalous structures, spectral signatures of vegetation, and liquid water temperature anomalies. Eyewitness excerpts from BIA's 1947 flight. The piece ended with a public challenge. We demand the full release of NASA's Antarctic imagery and an independent international expedition to verify these findings. The public deserves to see the complete map of the planet we live on. David leaned back in his chair, reading the article a second time. It was done. The information was out in the open, unstoppable now. Even if the government denied, discredited, censored, the questions would remain. Other journalists would dig deeper. Scientists would demand access to classified archives. He glanced at the clock. 9:00 p.m. Within hours, the article would spread across every news agency. By morning, the world would know, and then the real storm would begin. He walked to the window, looked out at the quiet night street. Somewhere out there, surveillance cars might still be parked, or maybe not. Maybe with publication they would realize watching him was pointless. The information had already escaped containment. He didn't know what came next. Would they hunt the source? Would they link the anonymous email to him? Would they enforce the non-disclosure agreement? It no longer mattered. The truth was out. Somewhere beyond thousands of kilometers of ocean and ice, there really were lands about which humanity was only beginning to learn. Lands that held secrets capable of rewriting history, geography, mankind's very place in the universe. And he, a simple cartographer, had helped open the door. David slept little that night. Every half hour he refreshed the news feeds. By 02:14 the Keller story had been picked up by 3 wire services. At 03:02 it hit the British tabloids' sensational headlines about Earth's hidden continents. At 04:47 a Russian state channel ran a short clip. Scientists demand transparency from NASA. What is behind the Antarctic wall? He finally dozed off at dawn and was woken at 07:00 by the alarm. No black SUVs outside, no new emails, no knock on the door. Just an ordinary California morning, except the world had changed. JPL 08:15 the security gate scanned his badge as always. Inside, the corridors felt different, a low electric hum of whispered conversations, screens quickly minimized when he walked past. In the coffee queue, 2 climatologists were arguing about chlorophyll signatures at 120 degrees south. They stopped talking when they saw him. His own cubicle was untouched. The computer booted to the usual desktop, only now there was a new folder labeled QMUPDPR, Queen Maud Update Public Release. Inside, sanitized Lancet mosaics, press-ready graphics, a 2-page FAQ stressing that no anomalous data have ever been verified. A sticky note on the monitor, Dave, please join media relations at 09:30. M. Haskins, head of the cartography section. David peeled the note off, heart thumping. They were going to use him as the face of nothing to see here. Conference room B 0936 people around the polished table, a tripod-mounted camera, a small microphone, flag reading NASA Earth Science. Haskins smiled too widely. Just a short statement. Read the bullet points, thank the Norwegian partners, done. He slid a single sheet across. Routine calibration imagery occasionally produces artifacts that resemble landforms. No evidence of ice-free terrain beyond 90 degrees S has ever been validated. NASA remains committed to open data and welcomes peer review. A young woman from legal sat beside an older man David didn't recognize, gray suit, no badge. When Haskins turned to adjust the camera, the man silently mouthed, "Stick to the script." David nodded, felt the sweat under his collar. The red light blinked. He read the statement in a level voice, answered 2 planted questions, walked out. Total time 4 minutes. On the hallway monitor, a CNN chyron rolled. NASA denies hidden Antarctic continents below it in smaller letters. Independent journalist stands by story. Keller's War Room, Washington, D.C. 14:00 EST. Martha Keller had expected pushback. She hadn't expected it by sunrise. Her encrypted inbox brimbled with a retired ESA radar engineer offering independent verification, a South American geologist claiming to have seen wall-like returns. In 1998, Chilean ice-penetrating data, 3 death threats. 1 in all caps Russian, a single line from a Proton mail address she didn't know. Quantum radar is only the top layer. Ask about gravity. She forwarded the threats to her lawyer, the technical offers to a trusted physicist at George Mason, and stared at the gravity line. Then she booked a red-eye to Buenos Aires. If official channels were locked, she'd go south herself. Pasadena night. David cooked pasta, drank a beer, watched the television mute. Every channel carried the same loop. Stern pundits, flashy graphics, a miniature Antarctica surrounded by green blobs labeled alleged territories. At 22:07 his phone vibrated, unknown number, text only. You did your part, now disappear. He deleted it, but the words glowed in his mind. Was Martha, Mills, someone else? He pulled the curtains, took the old paper city map from a drawer, spread it on the kitchen table, and began jotting coordinates from memory, just in case every electronic copy vanished overnight. 3 days later, White House press briefing. The press secretary entered holding a single sheet, read exactly 8 sentences, took no questions. The administration has complete confidence in NASA's data integrity. Allegations of concealed continents are unfounded. National security prohibits further comment on sensor capabilities. We urge media to rely on peer-reviewed science. Behind him stood a 4-star Air Force officer and the Deputy Director of National Intelligence. Reporters erupted. The mics were cut. That evening the story climbed to 1 on every social platform, and then within 90 minutes dropped to 14/27, gone from trending panels. Algorithms or intervention, impossible to tell. But the Streisand effect had already ignited. Mirrors, screenshots, blockchain pastes, torrents named barrier deep zips seeded across continents. JPL internal audit, day 6. David's manager called him in. Audit needed to scan every workstation for anomalous file residue. A technician ran a dog sniffer program on his machine, found nothing but the sanitized QMUPDPR folder. The manager shrugged. Guess you're clean, keep your head down. That night David found a new object on his desk, a cheap plastic thumb drive, bright orange, no brand. Inside, a single encrypted archive header, random-looking bytes. No note, no fingerprints. He pocketed it, said nothing. Buenos Aires, Ezeiza Airport, day 8. Martha Keller stepped off the jetway, passport stamped Turismo. A man in airport maintenance coveralls brushed past, slipped a folded paper into her coat pocket. Inside, a hand-drawn map of southern Patagonia, a red X on the coast at 52 degrees S, 70 degrees W, and a time. Mañana 04:45 a.m. Back of the sheet, bring boots. QR works both ways. She slept 3 hours, rented a 4x4, drove south through the night, phone wrapped in foil, GPS disabled. Patagonia pre-dawn 04:38 a.m. headlights off, engine idling, Atlantic surf crashing below cliffs. A second pair of headlights flashed twice. She got out, collar high against the wind. From the other vehicle stepped a short woman in Chilean naval fatigues, face hidden by a wool cap, breath fogging. "You want raw data?" the woman asked in accented English. "Then listen fast. Project QR7 Quantum Rail SAR, flown on a modified P3 in 98-3-11, looks down and sideways through ice, through rock. We saw the wall, we saw what's behind. Every flight tape was sealed. I kept one." She held up a palm-sized SSD sealed in plastic. "Trade for asylum, publish everything, no negotiations." Keller's recorder was already running. She nodded. The SSD changed hands. Both vehicles drove off in opposite darkness. Pasadena, same day, 22:11. David's living room lights were off. He sat with laptop, orange thumb drive inserted. The encrypted archive asked for password. He tried the only thing that made sense, the coordinate string he had memorized. 120,340, 123 degrees S, 340 degrees E, the center of the giant ring city. The volume opened. Inside, 3 files. README, TXT, 2 lines. If you read this, the map is already public. The next step is gravity. 9.4 milligauge anomaly. Ask why the ice wall is warmer than the air. Grav anomaly, TIFF, a false-color geoid map centered on the Ross sector, showing a +9.4 mgal positive Bauger anomaly tracing the exact line of the ice wall, as if a massive buried structure was pulling the wall downward. Flight log 1947 redacted, PDF, a declassified but heavily censored copy of Bayed's original radiogram transcript. One surviving sentence. The structure appears continuous, vertical face extends beyond horizon, suggest artificial origin, request immediate policy guidance, temperature +7 Celsius, inside canyon, repeat +7. David stared at the screen, at the warm yellow gravity bullseye superimposed on the white continent. For the first time since the agent's visit, he whispered aloud, "It isn't just a wall, it's a dam." David's whisper hung in the dark room. A dam, not a coastline, not a mountain chain, a dam. Built, maintained, holding something back. He layered the gravity anomaly over the LiDAR profile. The +9.4 mgal ribbon traced the ice wall within 50 meters for hundreds of kilometers. A freestanding ice cliff should not produce a positive Bauger spike that sharp. The only terrestrial analogs were concrete gravity dams and buried megastructures. He copied the files to an SD card, wiped the laptop, tucked the card into the hollow heel of an old hiking boot. Outside, the street was quiet. No sedan, no engine idling. Either surveillance had scaled back or gone invisible. Washington, Office of Secure Compartmentalization, Day 10, an interagency task force convened at 0600, NSA, NRO, CIA, NASA, USGS. Slide on screen. Barrier deep exposure timeline. Anon email right arrow Keller article right arrow 41M impressions mirror sites right arrow 200% increase foreign intel chatter right arrow elevated Patagonia handoff right arrow confirmed the chairman an Air Force 3-star tap the last line. We have a leaker inside QR7 archive. Find the sailor, find the journalist, find the original NASA terminal. Shut it down in that order. A junior analyst raised a hand. Sir, public narrative. Standard, no evidence, sensor artifacts, gravity data classified for national security. Meanwhile, Icewall Corridor is now a no-fly zone, NOTAM effective 1800 Zulu. Buenos Aires, Keller Safe Hotel. Night 11, she copied the Chilean SSD onto 3 encrypted sticks, hid one inside a hollowed-out book, one in a tampon applicator, one taped under a toilet cistern. Then she wrote the story, Gravity Anomaly first, Biads plus 7 degrees C Canyon second, Quantum Radar Theory third. Every sentence was footnoted with raw data. She scheduled it to auto-publish in 48 hours unless she entered a daily password, dead man switch. Her phone buzzed, unknown number, voice distorted. Ms. Keller, you possess stolen naval data. Return it and walk away. She answered calmly. I'm a journalist, not a courier. Come and get it with cameras rolling. The line went dead. Pasadena, JPL, Day 12. David's badge stopped working at the turnstile. Security escorted him to HR. Budgetary realignment, immediate furlough. No accusation, no paperwork, just out. He shrugged, handed over the laptop, kept the orange thumb drive in his pocket. Outside, he bought a prepaid burner, took a bus to Santa Monica, sat on the beach and watched the Pacific, the same ocean that lapped the other side of the ice wall. He opened the burner, created a Proton Mail alias, sent one line to Keller's public address. 9.4 Mgal, check the dam. D. He threw the phone into a trash can, walked away barefoot in the surf. Santiago, Chilean Naval Intelligence, Day 13. The sailor who had met Keller, LT. CDR. Valentina Rios failed to report for morning muster. Security video showed her private car leaving base at 0310, never returned. A nationwide alert was issued, treason clause invoked. In a safe house on the coast, Rios watched the news, hair dyed black, passport open to a new name. She had mailed 4 additional SSD copies to international journalists, handwritten addresses, no return label. One of them was Martha Keller. Internet, Day 14, 0200 UTC. Keller's second article dropped, Gravity Anomaly front page. NASA's own data show a buried mass concentration along the Antarctic coast, consistent with a man-made dam 400 m high and 700 km long. If real, it imprisons oceans beyond. If fake, why is the file classified cosmic top secret? Within minutes, ice dam trended worldwide. Memes juxtaposed Hoover Dam, 3 gorges, and the white wall of Antarctica. TikTok teens stitched videos. They hid continents behind a dam of ice. Governments issued identical statements. No comment on classified sensor metrics. Airlines quietly rerouted cargo flights away from the Ross sector. Antarctic Peninsula, McMurdo Approach, Day 15. A Royal New Zealand Air Force LC-130, call sign Icebird 41, received an en route NOTAM. Ross Ice Shelf Corridor prohibited below FL 450. Deviate 200 nm east. The pilot, 30-year veteran SQNLDR Trevor Hull, glanced at the co-pilot. That's half the continent declared no-fly. Someone's hiding something big. He banked the Hercules, snapped a casual photo of the distant wall through the cockpit side window, a vertical blue line under polar sun. When they landed at Christchurch, he copied the raw file onto an SD card and mailed it anonymously to Keller's subject line. From the cockpit, it's straight. Washington, Night 16, NSA Task Force satellite link intercepted Keller's inbox the moment the cockpit photo arrived. The image showed perfectly vertical edge, no natural glaciology slope, shadow calculation equals angle 89, 7 degrees plus or minus 0.2, engineering tolerance. The chairman slammed the table. Enough cat and mouse. Seize the journalist, seize the sailor, seize every copy. Use foreign partners if you have to. An aide whispered, "Sir, public spotlight. I don't care if she's on the front page of the New York Times, shut her down." Patagonia, dawn 17. Keller and Rios met again, foggy beach, no phones. They compared SSD serial numbers, identical batches, proof of chain of custody. A fishing boat idled offshore, skipper paid in cash, destination Falklands, then Punta Arenas, then any embassy that would listen. As they waited to the launch, headlights appeared on the cliff road, 3 SUVs, no plates. Rios whispered, "Keep walking. They can't shoot us in front of witnesses." A lone backpacker on the ridge filmed everything on GoPro, uploaded live to YouTube before the signal was jammed. The world watched 2 women in orange survival suits clamber aboard a rust-red trawler while black vehicles skidded onto the sand too late. The feed cut, but the Streisand effect exploded again, whereas Keller trended for 36 hours straight. Pacific Coast Highway, California, day 18. David thumbed a ride north, beard growing, wearing a thrift store jacket. A trucker dropped him at Big Sur. He camped among cypress, tablet gone, only the SD card in the boot heel remaining. Under starlight, he copied the gravity map and Bayad log onto 5 waterproof paper prints, sealed them in zip bags, addressed in pencil. National Academy of Sciences, RC-122, Union of Concerned Scientists, Cambridge Museum of Natural History, NY Reuters, London, Al Jazeera, Doha. He hitchhiked to San Luis Obispo, dropped the bundles into 5 separate mailboxes, no return address. Whatever happened next, the data would survive. Southern Ocean trawler Calida 7, night 19. Keller and Rios sat in the engine room, warmth, diesel thumping. The skipper handed them a sat phone, patch-through from London. On the line, editor-in-chief of The Guardian, "We've verified the gravity file with 3 independent geodesists. It's real. We're going front page Sunday. Can you give us an on-board interview?" Keller looked at Rios, grinned. "Patch us through. The world deserves to hear the damn story from the inside." London, The Guardian, 00:01 GMT. Sunday. The front page was already loading onto tablets in Seoul, Cape Town, Sao Paulo. The damn AT, the end of the world. Gravity data, pilot photos, naval logs, independent verification inside. A double truck center spread showed. The +94 MGAL anomaly colored blood red along the ice wall. Bayads +7 degrees C canyon, transcript in facsimile. The cockpit photo, straight blue cliff. No taper. A timeline from Operation Highjump 1947 to Keller's trawler interview 48h earlier. Within 90 minutes the website buckled under 22 million hits. Copies seeded to IPFS, torrents, blockchain, undeletable. Washington, 06:30 EST, same day the task force convened in crisis mode. The Attorney General authorized all necessary measures, foreign soil included. A quiet request went to Five Eyes partners. Locate vessel Calida 7, detain occupants, seize media. Reply from MI6 London, story already public. Arrest triggers Streisand squared, advise diplomatic route. The chairman slammed the folder shut. Then discredit the data. Flood the zone with junk science, fake maps, ancient alien influencers. Drown Keller in noise. Southern Ocean, 52 degrees S trawler, night 20. A low-orbit maritime beam from an unmarked satellite painted the Calida 7 AIS spoofed, transmitter dead. Keller recognized the electronic silence, hunt underway. She and Rios transferred SD cards to a watertight torpedo-shaped container, clipped it to a long-line fishing buoy. If the boat was boarded, the story would sink, literally, until retrieved. At 03:40 a black helicopter circled, searchlight flaring, no insignia. The skipper kept nets deployed, legal fishing activity, and radioed Chilean Navy on open channel. Unidentified aircraft harassing civilian vessel in national waters. Request escort. The helicopter withdrew, footage live-streamed via sat phone uplink. By dawn, ice wall heli trended, millions watching the shadow machine back off. Pasadena mailbox Monday, day 22. David, still hitchhiking north, slept in a roadside hostel. A push notification. Guardian podcast Keller live from the Drake Passage. He borrowed headphones, listened. We have multiple gravity data sets, coincident radar, historical eyewitnesses. Either every instrument on Earth is broken, or there is a dam 400 m high holding back continents. Your move, NASA. He smiled. The envelopes were already in the USPS system, crisscrossing America. World reaction. 48 hours. South African Parliament tabled a motion demanding international expedition. EU Greens pushed for UN Special Rapporteur on Antarctic transparency. TikTok scientists replicated the gravity anomaly plot using public EGM 2008 model. Same plus 9 MGAL ribbon. Flat Earth influencers claimed ice dam proves the dome. Lumped into same hashtag. Exactly the noise the task force wanted. Moscow, Russian Academy of Sciences. Day 24, a closed colloquium reviewed declassified Soviet airborne gravimetry from 1968-1982. Slide after slide showed the same linear positive anomaly, labeled then instrument error, ignore. An elderly geodesist approached the podium. We were ordered to delete the anomaly. I kept one roll of paper tape. He held up yellowed numerical printout, perfect match to Keller's map. The committee voted unanimously to publish. Cold War pride trumped secrecy. Within hours, Roscosmos tweeted the 1968 profile with the comment, "Data do not lie, questions must be answered." Washington, Situation Room, night 25. The president briefed for 8 minutes, asked only, "Can we demolish the story without demolishing the wall?" The NSA director replied, "Sir, the story is self-healing, every denial feeds it. Only option is bigger story, energy crisis, war scare, market crash, ice wall drops off page 1. The president nodded. Pick one, keep my fingerprints off it. Big Sur, California, day 26. David reached a seaside campsite, no cell phone, cash only. A violet post-sunset afterglow painted the Pacific. He burned the boot heel SD card in a tin of alcohol, ashes to the wind, insurance complete. Under the stars he sketched by penlight the Ring City coordinates, 17-point star-shaped bay, twin-peaked island, memories no one could seize. He whispered to the ocean, "I was there once. I'll be there again." Southern Ocean buoy drop, day 27. A storm front approached. Keller and Rios heaved the torpedo buoy overboard at 0610, GPS noted, beacon silent. Even if the trawler was intercepted, the data slept beneath 30 m of black water, retrievable by any fishing boat with the coded ping. They steamed toward Port Stanley, British territory, lawyer waiting, live stream scheduled. Global Sunday, day 28. Headlines worldwide: the dam that hides continents. Der Spiegel, Elja de Enoikratkoy Esteye Enoikratkoy. Commerçant, Chinese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter. Asahi Shimbun, El Muro que en Mundos. Clarence school teachers annotated the gravity map in class. Pilots discussed the NOTAM on cockpit forums. Programmers forked the open-source Antarctic anomaly viewer. The task force directive still read, flood, discredit, distract. But the meme was alive, self-replicating, borderless. Epilogue of Part 8. The first crack for 75 years. The ice wall had guarded its secret with classification, ridicule, occasional disappearance of the curious. Now 3 irreversible things had happened. Independent gravity proof, multiple nations, multiple decades eyewitness media, helicopter retreat, live stream, distributed archives, IPFS, torrents, buoy on the ocean floor. The wall still stood, white and silent. But the story could no longer be erased, only outrun. And outrunning gravity is impossible. Stanley, Falkland Islands, day 30. Keller walked off the trawler into cold drizzle, lawyer at her side, live stream rolling. She held up the torpedo buoy ping code, 12 random words, and spoke to the camera. The data is underwater, but it's online in 100 mirrors. Arrest us. You still can't arrest gravity. Royal Falkland Police watched from a distance, no warrant, no extradition request yet. The live audience peaked at 4.7 million #gravity is evidence. Within hours, Stanley Harbor filled with yachts, research charters, live-aboard bloggers, a flotilla of witnesses. Any black bag operation would now happen in front of the world. Washington, Day 31, NSC meeting the president's earpiece crackled with poll numbers. Trust in NASA down 28%, 62% support international expedition, 19% believe damn, metaphor literal. The NSA director slid a new memo. Option 1. Surgical seize Keller buoy, hack torrent seeds, launch cyber darkout. Option 2. Catastrophic, induce bigger crisis, erase story from headlines. Option 3. Controlled reveal, admit partial anomaly, steer narrative to natural geological ridge. The president tapped Option 3. Give them a bone, not the whole skeleton. Emphasize natural, ongoing study, no hidden continents. Schedule open press flight, cameras welcome, but keep them 500 nm east of the anomaly. Moscow, Day 32, Kremlin, a different calculation. Soviet archives already published, public prestige high, no wall to defend. The foreign minister approved a countermove. Offer multilateral expedition under UN flag, Russian icebreaker lead, full media pool, route directly over gravity spike. A televised chess gambit, Washington refuses equals looks guilty, accepts equals loses control. RT headlined. Let's see what they are hiding. Brussels, Day 33, EU Council, France, Germany, Sweden pushed for immediate overflight. UK, Italy urged NATO caution. Poland quoted right to know. Vote. Unanimous consent for EU flag scientific mission, independent of Pentagon assets. ESA director. We will launch Sentinel-8 early, dedicated Antarctic gravity mode, open data within 6 hours of acquisition. The wall had become diplomatic real estate. Stanley, Keller, and Rios, Day 34, they chartered a 20 m steel schooner, ice strengthened, former British Antarctic survey. Crew, skipper, 3 volunteers, 2 embedded journalists, 1 ex-GCHQ cryptographer, total 8 souls. Departure. Midnight course 190 degrees true, direct line to buoy coordinates. Live AIS, no secrecy, 40 viewers watching the tracker. If anyone interfered, the world would see. Southern Ocean, night 35, 62 degrees S, force 8 gale, sleet horizontal. At 03:17, the schooner's bow radar painted the torpedo buoy, blip every 10 seconds. Retrieval took 30 minutes, hands numb, deck awash. Inside the canister, 3 SSDs wrapped in argon bags, 100% dry, intact. Keller live-streamed the opening of the first SSD, 2.1 TB raw Chilean quantum radar cubes, 1998-2011. Chat exploded. We're watching history in a storm. Washington, same night, crisis room sat feed showed every frame. The NSA director clenched his jaw. They've crossed the Rubicon, data is out. Prepare full disclosure draft, controlled release in 48 hours. We set the vocabulary before Moscow does. McMurdo, USAP, Day 36, 0400 local LC 130 Iceberg 61. Special flight call sign changed to Pathfinder 1, NASA insignia removed, civilian tail number. On board, 12 international journalists, 4 scientists, 2 congressional staffers, live streaming helmet cams. Route filed. Scenic coastal survey, but cockpit nav plot locked onto gravity ridge, altitude 1500 ft, cloudless polar day. Millions watched the live split screen. Left. Keller's sailboat pitching, SSDs copied, data uploading right. USAF Hercules lifting off McMurdo ice runway, government finally leading the story, flight path, 78 degrees S, 14:37 GMT, co-pilots GoPro captured it first. A razor-straight blue cliff, 300 m high, no rubble apron, surface sheen like polished glass, base lost in cloud. Every screen on Earth split. Live from Antarctica, the wall, commentators narrated. No natural glacier forms a vertical face for hundreds of kilometers. This is engineered. The Hercules banked, cameras rolling, flew 70 km parallel, line never wavered, horizon to horizon. The world watched in real-time silence. Inside the Hercules, same moment a seismologist from Zurich stared at the portside window, whispered, "It's not just holding ice, it's holding back an entire hemisphere of land and ocean. If it fails—" He left the sentence unfinished. The camera caught it, clipped viral within minutes. Washington, White House, 15:00 GMT. The president walked into the press briefing room. No podium, no flags, live global feed. Today we witnessed an anomaly of nature previously unknown. A geological ridge of extraordinary linearity. We welcome international study. We will declassify censored data starting now. A zip file appeared on White House. Gov 2.7 GB gravity radar LiDAR 1976-2021. But every cube was resampled to 10 km resolution, too coarse to show cities, rings, canals, the bone, not the skeleton. Moscow instantly tweeted, "Thank you for the 10 km pixels. We have 10 m. Ready to share." Stanley Keller, day 37, night upload complete, entire Chilean raw archive, mirrored to 42 servers. She looked into the camera, wind whipping the mic. The bone is public, the skeleton is coming, and the dam still stands waiting for its first crack. She signed off with the buoy's ping code, 12 words, global chorus repeating them, a passphrase now carved into the internet's memory. Epilogue of Part 9. The point of no return. The wall had been seen live by half the planet. The gravity anomaly acknowledged by superpowers. Raw data immune to deletion. Mirrored, buoyed, torrented expeditions, assembling on 3 continents. The first crack, not in ice, but in 75 years of silence, had appeared. All that remained was to listen for the sound of continents shifting behind the dam. International waters, 64 degrees S, day 39:02. 11 GMT. A low-frequency tremor, M2.1, depth 0 km, epicenter exactly on the gravity line, registered on global seismic networks. Instruments at McMurdo, Numere, Dumont d'Urville lit up simultaneously. The waveform was unnatural, single spike, no aftershocks like a detonation or a fracture initiating. Keller, still aboard the schooner, 40 km west, felt nothing, but Inmarsat burst with text alerts. Seismic ice wall, unknown origin, stand by. She opened the live stream, 150 viewers, and spoke softly. If the dam decides to speak, the world should listen. Washington, 03:00 EST. Situation room, red LED map, Antarctica flashing. NSA chairman, not tectonic, too shallow, too linear. USGS director, equivalent energy 10 kton TNT, confined to a 2 km segment of the wall. President, natural, silence then. Unknown, Mr. President. Order given, scramble Pathfinder 2 recon with infrasound pods, armed escort. McMurdo 08:45 local, takeoff 2 LC-130s, 1 civilian media, 1 classified sensor suite lifted into crystal sky. Live feed split screen. Left. Journalists excited, cameras glued to windows right. Classified crew, faces grim, headsets tight. Approach 12:17 GMT, 40 nautical miles out. Co-pilot. Visual contact, wall intact but new feature at 77 degrees 45 S, 167 degrees 30 E. Zoom lenses extended, world watching. A vertical fissure, hairline against blue ice, but extending 800 m up from the base, perfectly straight, no jagged fracture. Sunlight glinted off a darker interior, not ice, matte gray, almost metallic. Commentator live. That is not a crack, that is a joint opening. Infrasound pods recorded sub-20 Hz pulses, rhythmic, 1.4 second interval, machine-like, not glacial creak. Seismo Global Networks 12:19 GMT, second spike, identical energy, 1 km north, then a third, fourth, marching along the wall like rivets letting go. Magnitude remained tiny, but the cadence was artificial. Social media exploded. It's waking up. Schooner Keller, 12:22 GMT, handheld 600. She filmed the fissure widening, millimeter per second, clean 90 degrees edges. Dark material inside, now visible, hexagonal cell structure like honeycomb concrete. She whispered, "The dam is not breaking, it is opening." Chat scroll, multilingual, same phrase repeated, "Let them out." White House, 12:30 GMT, president on hot mic, unintended feed. If that thing fully opens, every treaty on Antarctica is scrap. Prep continuity of government, unknown biosphere beyond. Feed cut but clip already torrented, continuity of government trended alongside ice dam. Wall 12, 41 GMT, Fisher length 7 km, fourth sensor aircraft, French, arrived on board Lee DAR painted interior cavity. Return signal. Void depth exceeds 3 km, temperature plus 6 degrees C, humidity tropical. Atmospheric sampler snatched vapor, isotopic ratio matches Earth-ocean, not extraterrestrial but definitely not Antarctic. Camera caught something moving inside, silhouetted against warm light, upright, bipedal, taller than human, stride fluid. Frame grabbed, pixelated but unmistakable, sent worldwide in seconds. Commentary fell silent, even anchor stared open-mouthed. Schooner Keller 12:45 GMT, tears in her eyes, not fear, awe. She spoke to camera. We are not alone. We never were. The wall was a door, and the door is opening. Stream buffered, satellite congested, but message leapt node to node, unstoppable. Seismic 12:50 GMT, final spike, cadence accelerated 1s interval, then 0.5s like a row of solenoids firing. Last trace M2.4, energy focused inward, not outward, as if latches were releasing tension into the cavity beyond. Then silence, flat line, no more spikes. Wall 12:52 GMT. The hinge A section 800 m wide, the height of the dam, swung inward, slow as a bank vault door, pivoting on an invisible axis, 90 degrees exact, stopped without shudder, perfect balance. Warm air exhaled from the opening, condensing into a vertical cloud lit by low sun, a pillar of light against the polar sky. Inside, visible now, a vast plain of emerald green, mist over tropical canopy, a river glinting silver, distant mountains under a pale gold sun that never set this time of year beyond the gate. And movement, many figures, some on 2 legs, some on 4, some aloft on wings that caught the light like prisms, all awaiting the moment the door stood open. Global silence, 12:54 GMT, 1 minute no commentator spoke. No government feed cut. 4 billion screens showed the same image. A rectangular gateway and a blue wall of ice, warm light streaming out, a new world breathing into the old. Then the sound captured by every mic, a single note, deep, resonant chord of relief and welcome, as if the planet itself exhaled after 75 years of holding its breath. After image 13:00 GMT, the first step, Keller on schooner bow lifted her foot over the gunwale, Rios beside her. They did not ask permission. They stepped onto the ice shelf, walked toward the gate, tiny figures against the vault of light. Cameras tracked them, world walking with them, heartbeat of billions in synchrony. As they crossed the threshold, the note swelled, harmonics layering, not music but language. Welcome home. We kept the light on. And the gate did not close. It stood open, invitation and promise, a door that would never again be sealed by classification or fear. Epilogue, the world rewritten. 1 year later, compressed montage. 178 new continents mapped in cooperation. Not conquest, treaty signed in the gateway shadow itself. Biods plus 7 degrees C valley now a park. Tourists hike from minus 40 degrees C Antarctica to plus 23 degrees C meadow in one afternoon. The ring city, 80 km diameter, welcomes scientists, poets, refugees, its builders, many-limbed, many-voiced, share tea and technology. Gravity anomaly monitored globally. The dam regulates itself. It was never a prison, always a valve. Keller won the first interspecies Pulitzer. Rios commands the joint human Southern Continent Coast Guard. David, the cartographer who remembered, teaches geography from a cliffside classroom. The world is larger than we were told, and larger still than we have yet imagined. Carry extra maps. And every year on the summer solstice, when the sun circles the gateway without setting, a chorus rises from both sides of the wall. We remember the silence. We will not return to it. The dam stands, but the door remains open. The map is unfolding forever. And that is the end of The Secret of the Ice. The end.